Shalom, guys. This is Onieh, and we're here once again for another lesson of learning Hebrew together, ancient Hebrew. And of course, as we've said before, part of learning ancient Hebrew is learning the original Hebrew as well as learning the biblical Hebrew, because both biblical Hebrew and the original Hebrew are both considered ancient Hebrew. The modern Hebrew and the Mishnaic Hebrew is not ancient Hebrew. So we're not focusing on those that much at all. But really we want to focus on biblical Hebrew and the Hebrew prior to biblical Hebrew. So that's what we're doing in our studies here. So today, like I've mentioned before, we are now going to start the very daunting subject of verbs. However, they're not too hard. It's just daunting, relatively speaking, to the other topics that we've covered so far. But it's a large amount of content and information how to deal with verbs. So because of that, it's going to probably be well over a month of us covering verbs to really, like the grammar rules of verbs, before we before we essentially finish reviewing all the information about how verbs work in Hebrew. So today we are going to focus on the core base verb form, and that's called often by scholars cow, the cow form. Now that comes from, I want to say it comes from a word that they use as a verb, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I'd have to double check that. But most of the time, when they come up with Hebrew keywords, it's usually referring to a linguistic concept, and they're using the word as an example, as a placeholder for all other verbs of that category. So with that said, let's get started. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to get some good stuff. We're going to start out with verbs. Excuse me, not verbs. We're going to start out with Hebrew for Christians. We're going to use that website again. We've used it before for different concepts, and I feel like it's a very good basic introduction. It's a way to introduce these things in a more basic form so that we're not overwhelmed by the information. So with that said, let's get started with that page. So this is, again, HebrewForChristians.com, and it's their grammar section of their page, and it's called Unit 9, and they have 6 lessons, if you will. Now, according to this, biblical Hebrew has 2 tenses, perfect and imperfect. So perfect means the action is complete, and imperfect means the action is incomplete. And they say the present tense is expressed through the use of participles. But however, the reality is past, present, and future can be covered by both tenses. It can be covered by both perfect and imperfect. Therefore, it is context which helps determine if it's past, present, or future. But there are also other forms for the verbs, or other grammar rules for verbs that help indicate whether something is past, present, or future. So we'll look at that. Sure, I'll just put I'm going to put the link that we're on right now so you guys can follow along if you want. Oh yeah, so call is called the light. It's called light because there's nothing attached to the verb. It's just the verb by itself, plus the subjects attached to it. Okay, thank you. Thanks for putting it on YouTube. So we're going to look at introduction to verbs first, and let's see what they say. Every Hebrew verb is based on a 3-consonant root that encodes or contains the basic semantic meaning or purpose of the given verb or noun. So the root malek is the root of the word malek for ruled, the verb ruled. It also means the word for king, and it means the word for kingdom. It's the same root word for all 3 of those words. Roots are divided into 3 groups known as a gizra with respect to one or more of its letters. So they're assigned 1, 2, or 3 for the consonants. So the first consonant in a 3-letter word is assigned the Roman numeral 1. The second letter in the 3-letter word is assigned the Roman numeral 2. And the third and last letter of a word, the root word anyway, is assigned the number 3. That is to help make it easier for scholars to refer to the different forms. Now, they say that there's strong roots and weak roots. The strong roots have only strong consonants that don't really change sound, but the weak roots have many letters that result in sounds of words changing for vowels, particularly. Now, that's what they say. I don't know if that's the case in the original Hebrew, but we do see that very often in biblical Hebrew, where the pronunciation of vowels changes for things like that. And yeah, so you just make sure you're copying the entire link. Oh, you mean YouTube won't allow it? Oh, Zoom link. Yeah. Um, oh, if it's not gonna allow it anyway, then it doesn't matter. Okay. Yeah, I have a little tab right here for my books of scripture. Okay. Um, so They often use this word pael for to illustrate different forms for the verb. And it tells us that not all verbs will be conjugated in the same way if there are guttural letters in the stem. So the guttural letters, of course, remember, guttural letters are A, E, H, and O, or Aleph, Hey, Het, Ayin. I'm just reading this. Okay, so we have the different types of stems that, and these are not going to be all covered today. The only one we're covering is the first one, the pa'al stem, a simple or cal action. See here, the pa'al stem is basic. The other stems are derived from it. Nearly 70% of verbs are pa'al in the Bible, that is. So roots with guttural letters or yod or nun beginning are considered weak verbs or weak roots. And so those letters often get removed or altered. And so the different forms here for what's called the binyamin or binyamin, you have the basic form, the pa'al. Then you have nifal form, which is basically a passive. And we give you a translation as an example. So the root kativ means, as a verb, it means he wrote, but naktiv means it was written. And for the pa'al, it says it means he engraved. And it's considered an intensive action or an intensive active. And pu'al is intensive passive, that it was engraved. Hifal is he dictated or you dictated, basically causing someone else to write. Hufal is causing a passive verb action. So was dictated. It could be for written when it's a hufal. And hitpayal is a reflexive. And then, so just like nouns, verbs have person, which is whether it's I or we or you or you all or he, she, it or they. Those different forms are distinguished for verbs. For number, it's the same thing, whether it's singular or plural. And for gender, same thing. Very often, verbs will have masculine or feminine subjects attached to them. And in voice, there is active, passive, and middle. And mode or aspect. I thought causal is the same as, oh yeah, it's the same, okay. It says, whereas English verbs indicate tense by means of spelling changes or through the use of helping verbs, Hebrew verbs are not marked for tense in the sense of time. You cannot tell just by looking at the verb form without context when the action occurs. So then we have something called perfect versus imperfect for the tenses. So perfect, as we see before, it means finished, and imperfect means ongoing, continuous. And so for each subject that's assigned to the verb, it has a different perfect or imperfect form that's attached to the verb. So each of the 7 different forms up here, the simple version of the word, and then the passive, and the intensive active, and the intensive passive, and the causative active, the causative passive, and the reflexive. All of those forms also have we can have different conjugations, up to 8, it says. And so we have perfect conjugation, imperfect, participle, and imperative is a command to second person. Jussive, on the other hand, is a command for the third person. And cohortative is a command for first person. And it gives the translation as example. Imperative is you praise the Lord, or you shall praise the Lord. Jussive is he shall praise the Lord. It's like giving a command, but to someone else. And then cohortative is like, often it might be like a group of people saying, let us do this. Even if that person doesn't need to do it, as a group, they are being committed to do something. And you have the infinitive construct and the infinitive absolute. And so that sounds like it goes with the whole construct form with the verbs. Like where sometimes forms get dropped and replaced, like in the plural for masculine, mem gets dropped and yod stays in its place to signify construct state. Like the sons of God, it's not Banim Elohim, it's Bani Elohim. And let's see here. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this first page. I don't know why it's showing me though these different forms. Like I'm not trying to look at participles. Whoops. It says unit 9 is participles. That's not good. Were we on the wrong one the whole time? Oh, so it was unit 10. Oh, wait a minute. That's weird. It doesn't let me click these. Wait, well, we just did this, so let's see. So perfect and present. And then we have imperfect and imperatives. So let's take a look at this. All right, so for perfect, it goes at the end of the word, and it's tav yod or thi. And so like for the root word example is kept or keep, the verb or word shamer. And so if you're saying I kept, it's chamerthi. And you kept is shamereth. And that's a second person masculine singular. And then you have second person feminine singular, and it's spelled the same. And then third person singular for masculine, there's no different form. It's just the root word, chamer. And then there's the feminine, which is hey at the end. It's chamere, which of course we discussed before in other videos. Tav is the original ending for the feminine suffix. Then we have the plurals, and we have we, which is new. And so we kept would be shamer nu. And then there's tham and tham. So it would be you kept for both for plural you. And then they kept it has a wa at the end. And these are the short, this is a chart right here, which lists the basic ending forms for perfect. I'm gonna do as much as I can for this, guys, but my eyes are so droopy, so I don't know how long I'm gonna be going for this, but I'll try to do my best to cover as much as I can for verbs. Um, the normal word order in Hebrew is verb, subject, object. So like often, like in English, we have subject comes first, followed by verb, and then object. But in Hebrew, it's usually verb first and then subject. But not always, there's exceptions. So it's important to look at every case to make its own determination. So if you say in English, I love you, or not, that's a bad example. Let's say the king loves the queen. In Hebrew, you'd say loves the king the queen. So you do it in a different order. It's kind of similar to what we said earlier the last week with adjectives, where uh, where the order for adjectives differs from English versus Hebrew. Like good person, in Hebrew it's person good. So you see it's the exact opposite. So the same thing applies to the word order in Hebrew. It's a verb subject, and it makes sense in Hebrew, even though the word order seems strange to us in English. That's just tradition. Mm. Let's see, stative verbs. There are two functional types of verb that appear in the cal stem. Verbs that describe an action, or it's a functional sense, and then verbs that describe a state of being. Those are called stative verbs. Oh, Melissa had to go, but that's okay. Just like we noticed the ending forms for the other word for keep, the same applies to this state of verb, meaning so and so is heavy. Okay, next we go to imperfect. And all right, guys. I just need a quick drink, so I'm just gonna just quickly step out. I'll be right back because I need something to kind of help me stay awake. So like my eyes are really tired, and I don't want to end this prematurely. I really want to give you guys some good information for verbs. So just give me a sec to have some liquid. I'm gonna have probably some milk, and then I'll come right back, and I think I'll have some extra energy from drinking. So I'll be right back. So give me like 2 minutes. All right. My apologies for the delay. I actually did not get a lot of sleep in the last couple of days. I got to do better about that. So what we have for imperfect is you, for the most part, most of the time, imperfect is at the beginning. It's a prefix at the front of the verb, whereas for perfect verbs, it's always at the end, a suffix of a verb. But so see, we see right here, I keep or I will keep. They add will because often it's talking about the future, but it's not always talking about the future. So will is actually not always a correct translation, but it basically means I keep. So before it was I kept, perfect, it's complete. Whereas I keep it's not ending. It's a ongoing thought. I keep. Um, it's like if someone says, "I learn." I learn. Like if someone says, "Hey, do you learn anything?" Yeah, I learn. You're not saying you learned something. You're saying you learn, and that's an ongoing thing. So it's kind of like how it's being used. Um, so I keep, and then you will keep for both oh no, that one's for masculine, um, singular, and the feminine singular. Uh, it has okay. So the first one is I keep, and that's basically pronounced Ashmer, and it is for both masculine and feminine. It means I keep because I is the same regardless if it's masculine or feminine noun. That is the subject. Then the second person singular masculine is you will keep. So or you keep. So that's Vashmer. Vashmer. And then the feminine singular for second person is you keep. And both masculine and feminine of you keep have tav at the beginning, but feminine has yod at the end, whereas masculine doesn't. And then you have for third person masculine singular, Ishmer, Ishmer, and it's also possible it should be R, like so maybe it's either Ashmer or Ashmar, and Thashmer or Lashmar, and um, and there's Lashmari or Lashmari, and there's Yashmer or Yashmar, and the prefix is tav. And remember, I told you that the the feminine often takes a tav as its form. So here we see that tav is used for feminine singular as a prefix. Not hey, but tav. That's some evidence that tav was originally the feminine form for nouns and subjects. So so then we have the plural forms, and we keep is nashmer or nashmar, and then you will keep, or no, you keep masculine and you keep feminine. Masculine is tashmaru, tashmaru or tashmaru, and the feminine is tashmina or tashmana, and they will keep is Ishmaru or Ishmaru. And for the third person feminine plural, it's Toshmina or Toshmana. So what's interesting is, and this gives us some vocabulary too, but so in Akkadian, we look at the verb forms. Let's take a look at those verb forms. All right, so we've got stative verbs. We have the imperative, infinitive, we have the participles. We also have what they call the preterite, perfect, and the present. And the stative actually is corresponding with the perfect tense of Hebrew. This is Akkadian again, remember. So the stative verbs in Akkadian correspond to the perfect verbs, and the what they're calling here the preterite corresponds with the imperfect form in Hebrew. So you have apros, and what's PRS? What's parash? That's from a root that means to decide. So it would be something like it'd be like I don't know if this is the correct word exactly, but just to give you this understanding. So parish. And that's the word that's used for examples of words in Akkadian. So if we take a look, we have Aleph at the beginning. And lo and behold, Aleph at the beginning in Akkadian. And then plural for first person is we, with it's a noon, letter N, and look, it's the same thing, letter N. Then you have masculine and feminine. We've got the both masculine and feminine for you, singular, has tav at the beginning. Then the one has no ending, whereas the other has a yod ending. Feminine has the yod ending. Well, when we look at Akkadian, we see the masculine has no ending, but it just has the tav at the beginning. Oops, I'm looking at the, oh, yeah, I got the right one. And then it has a yod at the end, just like in Hebrew. Isn't that interesting? Pretty cool, huh? And then if we take a look, we've got wa at the end for second person masculine plural. So let's take a look. Now in Akkadian, it makes no distinction. Both masculine and feminine have a wa at the end and a tav at the beginning. And the same exact thing occurs for masculine in Hebrew. But the feminine instead takes a different form. So like in Akkadian, like I said, the second masculine plural is both, okay, let me rephrase. In Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, that is, the second masculine plural form has tav at the beginning and wa at the end. Tav as a prefix, wa as a suffix. The same exact form occurs in Akkadian, but occurs for both the masculine and feminine, whereas the Hebrew replaces the feminine form, replaces the tav wa with tav nun he. And then we take a look and we have third person with yod at the beginning. That's what we see right here. Oh, sorry, up here. But then for masculine plural, for third person, we have wa also at the end. Same thing right here. But for the feminine, Hebrew once again has the na ending, whereas Akkadian does not. And notice also that Hebrew has, biblical Hebrew also has tav as the prefix in the third person feminine plural, whereas Akkadian doesn't. It consistently has only yod as a prefix for third person, both singular and plural, for all the forms. And so what that basically tells us is that this form right here was both applied to both masculine and feminine in the original Hebrew. We can tell that based on what Akkadian says. So another interesting thing is that we see a distinction between u and ah. It's not always clear how to write it down, because these are transliterations from cuneiform letters, which are more complicated letters. But so far, most of the stuff has been corresponding. But the ones that are harder to put into a box are the distinction between U and A with a line over it. Because as we can see in many places, A with a line over it is the equivalent of wa, Akkadian's equivalent of wa. And yet, we have a long U, or a U with a line over it, that also seems to be connected with wa, but for some reason it was pronounced differently. So I'll have to do more research in that specifically. But once again, I'm going to point you guys to where basically the Assyrian phonology actually agrees closer with the biblical Hebrew rather than Akkadian. Now, Assyrian is a dialect of Akkadian. It's just a dialect that's closer to biblical Hebrew. So it's probably where biblical Hebrew ultimately comes from. Interesting. It says that Babylonian, where it has U in the first syllable, Assyrian has A. Like look down here. You've got the long, or you have the U with a line over it, and you have A with a line over it. And so Babylonian and Assyrian had the different forms. And let's see. Hmm. 1 second here. Hold on, I'm trying to find it. Um, I've read it in here before, so I just gotta find it again. Hmm. I don't get it. Where is the form? Hold on. I'm trying to find this. Um, Let me try the Assyrian one again. Maybe I just misread it or read through it too quickly. Okay. I don't know why I couldn't find it. It was right there the whole time. All right, sorry guys. So we take a look. This is in the Akkadian book still. Now remember, we're looking at Akkadian because Akkadian is basically a dialect of Hebrew. That's how close to Hebrew it is. So keep that in mind. So you see right here where it says third person feminine singular prefix of verbs is ta rather than e as in Babylonian, except in Old Assyrian only when the subject is inanimate, in which case the prefix is e as in Babylonian. Thus the third person feminine singular and the second person masculine singular have the same form. So we take a look and we look at the Hebrew form. And so you have second masculine singular right here. And third person feminine singular. And look, see the arrows? The arrows are there to tell you that they're the same, they're spelled the same. Same thing right here. So isn't that an odd system that the language would have two forms that are spelled identically but mean something completely different? That sounds like it'd be very confusing. But in original Hebrew, in Akkadian, that wasn't the case. Instead, the second masculine singular was the tav prefix. But the third person feminine singular was yod, not tav. And then it says, let's see. There's also something that I saw here for Akkadian a while back, where basically it said that that the length of the vowel actually isn't indicated in Akkadian, and that's just scholars saying what they think it should be. Let me see. Let me see if I find it here. It says, notice that in a transliteration, vowel length is not indicated, while in a normalization, diacritics that distinguish homophonous signs are not written. Now, I thought I read somewhere that the length isn't actually in Akkadian, but I'm trying to actually find that. I don't actually see it. Um, well, I also have to do more. I have to do more study on Akkadian as well. So we'll have to get back to some of that stuff. No, so I'll check it out sometime later in terms for vowel length. I'll have to read the Akkadian thing more fully to find it. I'm pretty sure it said that somewhere, but I'll double check. So at any rate, that was long pauses between this. My apologies, but as you can see, these forms or this form in this column is identical to the Hebrew with a few minor exceptions. It's virtually identical. Same thing we have here with the stative. The stative corresponds with the perfect. This was the imperfect that it corresponded to, but the stative corresponds to the perfect. So we take a look. We take a look at that, and we go back here and we look and we see wait, oh yeah, wrong one. Okay, so we have the aku ending that it does not agree with Biblical Hebrew. Biblical Hebrew has the the ending. However, note what comes next. New. That's a we. And look, here's new for we. Then we have ta and t. So we take a look. We have ta for masculine, and then te for feminine. And then, oops. Then we have unu and ina for the plural, second person plural. The second person plural is, it corresponds with this one down here for both masculine and feminine. And that actually agrees with, I believe it's Arabic forms, whereas Hebrew has tam and teen, or tan, in other Semitic languages that are similar to Hebrew, it also has two noon endings. And then third person singular. And look, it has the tav rather than the hey. So otherwise that agrees with the hey here, but it's just tav originally, not hey. And masculine singular has no ending form, same as in Akkadian. And then third person plural, we've got just the wa at the end, and we see that masculine and feminine both have that, but the masculine has the long u, and the feminine has the long a. Okay, so let's see where we are. I think going further, like with imperatives, things like that, is a lot too much information today. So let me see what we got here. I'm gonna go to this book now that we've been reading from. Okay. Now the verb that scholars like to use for some reason is the verb katel, which means he killed. I'm not sure why they picked the he killed one, but that's the one that scholars like to use. And they use that to give like a example word to cover all the different forms a verb can have. Interestingly, it says of more than 1,300 verb roots attested in the Bible, only 4 are attested in all the 7 conjugations. Obviously, the Hebrew language used all 7 conjugations for nearly every verb. It's just that the Bible is only a tiny fraction of the literature of the original Hebrew. Let's see here. So the early Jewish grammarians were the ones who decided that to call the conjugation, which doesn't have stuff added to it, is light, whereas the derived conjugations are called heavy because they have additional parts added to them. Let's see. Is there? I'm just looking to see if there's anything additional. Verbs express transitive or intransitive action. Some verbs may also express a reflexive action. Like there's the reflexive form, but there might be a verb that actually means something reflexive, so you don't need to use the reflexive form as much. See right here, they're referencing the Akkadian with a PRS. It corresponds with katil. And then, strangely, they have Akkadian Maris instead of with an M instead of a P. I want to see if it tells us anything about that. This might be a mistake. I'll have to do more research on that though. It's probably not a mistake. It's just a unusual form. Just looking through this, seeing if there's anything extra here. Interestingly, they suggest that the pronunciation of A versus I might have been based on whether it was an active verb or a stative verb. That's an interesting theory. I'd have to look more into that though. So this gives us a lot of this is good for our vocabulary. So I'm gonna probably add this on Monday to our vocabulary in the document file. Because look at all these verbs we got. Be good, to be evil, to be great, small, high, low, strong, weak, heavy, light, far, near, approach, cling, pure, impure, full, love, desire, hate, fear, dread, tremble, forget, clothed, sated, hungry, thirsty, sleep, lying or lie down, become childless, to be able to learn, to die, to ask, to inhabit, to hear or listen. So that's a good chunk of vocabulary, and I'll try to add that as soon as I can. Now, what's interesting is that the forms of the verb endings, right? The forms of the endings, the suffixes or the prefixes, whether it's a perfect or imperfect verb, it actually corresponds very much with the pronouns. So let's take a look. Hold on. We look at the pronouns, it's the personal pronouns specifically. And so you've got the KI or the KU, and take a look. The KI ending for first person occurs right here. Parsaku. See, it's using the second half. And then they take a look at this. It's with a T and a hey for masculine singular and a T for the feminine singular. So we look and we see, once again, ta is for masculine, which agrees with the second half of the pronoun. And then for we, the new part of the word for we, and anehnu and anu, news the ending of both words, and look, news at the end right here in Acadia. And then we have the atom and aton. So TM for masculine and TN for feminine. This is a difference because in Akkadian it just has the UN and the IN. And then for they, it has ME and NE, or EN and EM. Let's see here. So that differs for the third person plural. And then for singular, we have the wa for masculine and the yod for feminine. Um, then so for third person, it doesn't have the final forms, but for the other ones, it has all the final forms essentially as the actual pronouns. So that's probably where the pronouns come from that are attached to verbs, because the verbs have these, these are all the verb plus the subject. Now, let me just quickly check here. Aramaic and Arabic. Um, so we take a look, and we have, let's see, na or nu is the same. Okay, look, we've got the masculine, singular, atun, and the feminine singular, atin. We have enun and enin. So as we see, that actually agrees with Akkadian. Let's see. Okay, so in Arabic we have Arabic actually agrees with Hebrew with the M and N, but Aramaic agrees with Akkadian. So that's an interesting difference. More research should be done on that, I think. Let's see, Proto-Semitic. The scholars seem to be confident that it was originally M versus N. And we know that Akkadian was not the perfect original language. So Akkadian, the Akkadian forms might actually be off from the older form that is preserved in Hebrew and Arabic, but it's not 100% clear. Some stuff about Akkadian, for example, we don't have full knowledge on in terms of the origin of certain things. But as a heads up, guys, interestingly, in original Hebrew or in Akkadian, we see that there's the regular pronouns, but then there's also these interesting other pronouns, which are oblique and dative, and they have different forms. And the same thing for the suffixed pronouns, it has different forms. Let's see, what time do we got here? I think we're going to end at 11. Then it says, oh yeah, so here's the cool thing. This is what I was talking about earlier. The primitive Semitic form is Ketalku. The K is preserved in Ge'ez, Ethiopian. It has become T under the influence of T of the second person, and U has become I on the analogy of the separate pronoun and the suffix of the first person. And it says, El Marna glosses attest to the ending of TI. So that the TI ending goes back a long time ago. However, the overall evidence indicates that originally it was a KU ending rather than a TI, or a KI ending rather than a TI. And it's cool that Ethiopian preserves that Akkadian feature. It's unlikely that people who spoke the Ethiopian language decided, you know what, let's copy Akkadian. The most logical explanation is that Ethiopian is a descendant from a language close to Akkadian, and it inherited from generation to generation that form of the letter K in Hebrew or in the Semitic languages. Now, we're not covering this today, but what scholars say is that certain times nouns can be included in a verb, which they call paragogic noun. So we'll be taking a look at that another lesson. The idea is that scholars think that some letters are added for no apparent reason at all, and they don't actually mean anything, according to the expert scholars. But I suspect that it probably does mean something. It just eludes most people. Okay, so I think it's probably best that we stop here because I'm not in a full alert state to have the necessary energy to convey in a way that I feel is beneficial for you guys. Like as you could tell, I've been making long pauses because I've been reading and stuff as I've been doing this today, and so um, I want to take the verbs slowly because it really is overwhelming the information in it, and some of the topics I was just reading, there's a lot of stuff about it which I don't want to get into today. So we will try to cover that next time. Basically, we'll talk about the rest of how imperfect verbs work and their forms. We'll do a refresher, and let's see. Okay, there's something called the inverted perfect, where the tense gets changed in a weird way. So we're gonna talk about that next time. All right, guys. You know what? I think we should end it. Anyone have any final things they want to say before we end? Like any questions or comments or commentary, feedback, anything? And like I said, apologize. This is a shorter lesson tonight, but I just don't have the energy to do it in a way that I think is beneficial for you guys. So hopefully what I did share tonight was of interest to you. Again, lots of pauses, which I felt bad about, but hopefully it was worth the wait because I did share some cool aspects, especially as it relates to Akkadian. Uh, hopefully you guys enjoyed tonight's lesson, and we're gonna have a lot more vocabulary words on Monday to practice with. So on Monday, I'm gonna add them to our list. All right, doesn't look like anything's being said by anyone, so I'll let you guys go. Have a great weekend. Shabbat shalom, and thank you for supporting my content and trying to help me learn Hebrew and helping each other learn Hebrew. I really appreciate it. God bless you guys and have a great week.